All right, good morning, you, the few, the proud, the brave, those who will pass. We have a few things to talk about today. Let's see here. What can I show you? Let's look at the first exam real quick. Oh, let me see. Okay. These kinds of things always give me pause because we have said repeatedly, and it says in the reading, the United States is not really a democracy, and yet a bunch of people answered true. So pay attention, do the reading, right? Get that one right. Look, republics are not a form of direct democracy. That should be equally obvious. Republics are designed by fast action for fast action by government. No, they're not. They're designed to make things happen slowly. In a constitutional monarchy, a king or queen retains ultimate authority in government. No, that's false. Liberal democracy, I think everybody got that. Authoritarian states don't have meaningful elections. Now, look, if you answered these two questions in a particular way, then this should show up in your essay question. It just boggles my mind that people will get one half of sort of the question right, and the other half, well, you ignored what you just said earlier. So now this one does tend to throw people a little bit. A good constitution applies differently to different groups of people. No, that would not be a good constitution. If you treat different citizens different ways, that's just wrong. Let's see here. Everybody, this class starts at 10. I really wish people could show up on time. It's not like you have to walk across the building, right? Civil rights and civil liberties, pretty much the same thing. No, the US Constitution grants citizens a defined set of liberties. No, and we talked about that, right? The Constitution says these are liberties that government can't take away, but it clearly doesn't put any limits on what other freedoms you might enjoy. So UN Declaration of Human Rights has a more expansive view of freedom than does the US Constitution. True. Now, this is an issue for us. It's an issue in every one of these classes I teach. Look, the United States government is designed in a certain way. We get that. Not every government looks like that. And many of them are republics, and many of them are liberal in the sense that, they're not illiberal democracies. They have real elections, citizens have rights, etc. But they don't have division of power. Okay. I mean, is Canada does not have division of power. Is Canada a horrible place to live? No, frankly, it's probably nicer than the US right now. So try to get that into your heads. All governments don't look like the United States government. So you can't confuse those two things. The rule of law means that citizens and governments respect the rule of law. That's what that means. So federalism has nothing to do with branches. I say that pretty clearly in several places. 88% of the world's governments are unitary, so they're not all federal in nature. This one we tended to do okay. Let's see. Get people in here because everybody's showing up when they want to. A politically free state might include all of the following except a court system that fulfills the will of the government. That's not the job of court systems. So if the court system is simply an arm of the government to enforce what they want to have happen, that's not political freedom, isn't it? Now, we did okay on this question, I have to say. A true republic, everybody pretty much understood that this is when you have free and fair elections and citizens have rights, etc. And in a liberal democracy, they have elections, but they're not always free and fair. Between an authoritarian and a totalitarian state, we sometimes got a little bit confused on this part. Not bad. I mean, you've got the general idea, but an authoritarian state, they pretty much only care about power. And it can be a group of people, it can be the military, any number of possible things there. They also might have elections, but clearly, they don't matter. A totalitarian state also involves ideology. So it's not just that one or a small group of people have power. It's that there's a particular ideology that they expect everyone to adhere to. So the Soviet Union at various times was a totalitarian state. We can find many others. So anyway, we did all right. Branches and levels. Okay, good question, Natalie. Branches of government are like the president and the Congress and the courts. Okay, that has nothing to do with federalism. Absolutely zero. All right, Canada has federalism and they don't have branches. Federalism is about a division of power between levels, which is the national government and states or provinces. So those are two different things. So there are lots of liberal states, true republics, that don't have federalism, and some true republics where they don't have branches. So I hope that's clear. All right. Let us move on now. Okay, good questions, everyone. What do we got next? Hang on here. Citizens and politics. So the next test is on that chapter, Citizens and Politics. And so you got to read that. There's still too many people. They're probably not here. Or finding random BS on the internet, which is almost always wrong, and sometimes just copied, which is plagiarism. And so let's just not do that. You're all plenty smart. There's just no excuse for that. You're supposed to convince me that you understand the material and some of the stuff out there. Oh my God, who are these people? Why do they think they understand politics? I mean, I guess they don't know enough to know that they don't know. There's a name for that, by the way. But anyway, interest groups are an ever-present feature of politics. About the only place on earth where there are not interest groups is North Korea. So that's because they've all been eliminated. The only potential interest group is the military, and they get everything they want. So in most other states, there are interest groups, and they are just collections of people, usually formal, but we might think of them informally as well. And they get together to try to get policy. That's what interest groups want. They want policy. They want laws that help them, and they don't want laws that hurt them. So we have them at all levels. So if you think about Washington State, well, teachers unions, the Washington Education Association is an interest group. Boeing, Microsoft, Amazon, agriculture, fishing, forestry, I mean, pick an industry. Certainly there are groups that want to see more gun control, and groups, the NRA, that still sort of tries to say, no, everyone needs a gun. There's groups that align around different views on reproductive rights. There are, there's a senior citizens lobby. So there's all kinds of groups, pick an interest. And the thing about it is that at some level, you are all part of a group. I used to ask this question. I gave it up because it was probably too confusing. But if you think about it, you're in an interest group that is students, right? So if you don't now, you soon will care about what tuition is, and you will care about, certainly, I'm sure, care about whether you have to take standardized tests or not. There are student lobbies, college level, usually. They're not very effective. One, they don't have any money, and two, well, they graduate, right? Or they otherwise leave college. So the thing about what students want is, generally speaking, wait and they'll be gone. But that's a formal interest group, right? They go down to Olympia and they lobby state legislators about tuition and financial aid and things like that, with varying degrees of success. Sometimes Highline's a little part of that. Folks will come over and talk to me and say, well, what do you think we should do? And I'll say, look, talk to suburban Republicans, because those are the people that you would need to convince. The Eastern Washington Republicans, they don't care. And the Democrats, well, they're already for less tuition and more financial aid. So anyway, there are a number of things that interest groups do. So this is something we should understand. And if I ask you a question about this, say this and say a little more. One of the things that we're running into, and this is because nobody's taught you how to do this, that's okay, we're going to get better. Explain things, right? So one thing that interest groups do is they lobby elected officials, and that means they have volunteers or frequently people that they've hired who go to city halls and county seats of government and state legislatures and Congress, and they talk to elected officials and attempt to persuade them, do this, not that. Really good lobbyists will tell both sides of the story, so that when the legislator, say, goes back to her or his district and somebody says, well, why'd you vote that way? They're ready to say, well, I thought about this and here's what's going on. Lobbyists generally don't lie. This comes as a great surprise to people, but here's the thing. If you go see somebody in government and you lie, you will be found out. And if an elected official finds out that they've been lied to by a lobbyist, guess what? The door closes. You get no more access. So that tends to be true. Interest groups support or oppose candidates, and they do this in a couple of ways. They give money, obviously. They also spend money on their own. They make independent expenditures, and they attempt to persuade voters to, vote yes or no on any particular contest. You're going to see this in the next election. So a couple of years ago, Washington State legislature passed a capital gains tax, which means that if in any given year you sell more than $250,000 worth of stock, which is almost no one, you will have to pay some tax on it. And the tax isn't really that high, relatively speaking. But I'm already seeing ads of, sad looking rich people, and they're going to try to convince you, voters, that this is government's first step towards performing a total cashectomy and taking all of your money forever, which is simply not true. So it's going to be a very interesting interest group because it's not terribly numerous, but they have piles of money. Some of them are billionaires, right? So we'll see. They attempt to persuade members of the group and also voters at large to vote one way or another. So a lot of interest groups will have report cards on particular, say, state legislators, and they mail these out to their members, and they say, this person voted with us and this person voted against us. And, they give them some kind of rating, sometimes a grade, say, vote for them, not them. And then finally, they advertise on behalf of their positions. They try to convince the public at large that they're the good guys and everybody else is the bad guys. When I was doing research on my third book, which is still coming out about Washington state politics and government, the thing I noticed, because I talked to lots of people who were, involved with interest groups, every one of them is apparently at a disadvantage. They never get to walk downhill. Everybody else is better off in terms of interest groups than they are, which I think is silly. So they have a big effect. Right? There's no denying interest groups, people with money particularly, have some effect on politics. There's no doubt. On the other hand, they're not always effective. I mean, an industry you probably don't think about, but actually employs a lot of people and pays really well. Washington State has 5 major oil refineries, 1 in Tacoma and 4 up north, 1 in Anacortes and I think 3 in Bellingham. They're not terribly effective in Olympia. They're not popular, right? Especially in the era of climate change, they're really not popular. And I don't know that they do a particularly good job at that. And I've had other lobbyists tell me that. It's like, no, they're not very good at this. Interest groups tend to be effective, have more clout, basically on, how many people do they represent, 1, and 2, how many jobs do they represent? And are they good jobs? So Walmart probably employs a lot of people in Washington State. They're not getting anywhere. because they pay badly, and everywhere Walmart goes, standards of living fall. This is true. I'm not making this up. On the other hand, for a long time, Boeing they had really top flight lobbyists. I mean, they had hired good people, but they employed so many people and they paid living wages. So if you were a legislator and there was a Boeing plant even near your district, how stupid would you have to be to sort of try to play hardball with Boeing? So for a long time, that was true. It's not as true now since they've cut back and moved things away. So, I mean, that sort of proves the point. Finally, the leadership may not be a perfect representation of the membership. So in times when I've talked to people sort of, at the top of, say, a union, and then the people who were just members, the things they're saying are often different. So they're not always thinking about the same thing. So interest groups don't tend to be a monolith, right? This huge mountain of force. They're frequently more diverse. Interest groups that focus on a small number of issues also tend to be more effective. So if you're all over the place, you're not going to be as effective. If you're sort of sticking to your knitting, as they say, you'll do better simply because you have this small set of issues and you can focus on that, develop expertise, and do better at that. So anyway, read that section. And if you get a question on this, explain stuff, right? If you just pop the question into Professor Google, God knows what's going to turn up. And I've seen these answers so often, it's like, I don't have to read them. I can just smell them. So political culture. Now, there's a question in there about political culture, and in a typical quarter, 2/3 of the class will get this wrong because they didn't read this part or pay attention. Political culture is simply the way people in a particular region feel about politics, and they think differently in the South and in the Northeast and in the Midwest and out here, right? For example, we're very concerned with process. We work on something politically, we have a process, right? And we want to make sure that there is a process and that everybody gets called upon and people are allowed to participate. Whereas in other parts of the country, they'd have said, that's a problem, let's fix that. And you're either with it or you're not. So we knew for at least 20 years that the old Alaskan Wave Viaduct would collapse when we had a big quake, and we will get a big quake, right? And it would pancake. And since it was a double decker, if that had happened at rush hour, there would have been thousands of deaths. And yet it took us, 20 years, literally, to fix that. Back east, say Chicago, they'd have done that in a year. They'd have just said, let's do this. I mean, one state legislator told me, she said, if it happens, I hope it happens in the middle of the night when nobody's on there, and then we'll have to fix it. So, and then when we finally decided we had to fix it, oh my God, I mean, people wanted the tunnel, which is what we got. And people just wanted it surface streets. Of course, those are people who live downtown and don't have to commute there. And I knew a guy who was obsessed with building a bridge. I don't know where it would have gone. I don't know how that would have worked. Every time I saw him, it's got to do something about this. So we ended up with the tunnel. It's not bad. So the other part of that we might think about is called political socialization. And that's simply all of the influences in your life that sort of bring you to where you are in terms of your politics. And as you take the ideology survey there, you can see, well, this is sort of what I am. And it's imperfect. You will read those questions and go, well, I don't agree 100% with that. Well, that's life, isn't it? So your parents, education, having taken this class, you will feel slightly different about politics than you did before. And it's not my goal. My goal is to inform you so that you can at least look at stuff and make a rational decision. It's much easier to believe than to think, but let's be thinkers. It works better. Your friends, where you work, what part of the country you live in, because there are different political cultures. So there's a question about that. You'll get it right now if you were paying any attention at all today. So now this is an interesting topic. Now, media connects people to politics, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But the first point I want to make is that in every class in which I ask people about media, half the class will say, I don't trust the media, and I don't watch or listen to anything. And I think, well, then how do you know? How do you know? And how do you know that someone who's like way closer to a particular event somehow knows less than you do, who are thousands of miles away? So its media is by no means perfect, but it's not sort of this great vast wasteland of misinformation. There certainly is some misinformation on one channel in particular, but by and large, most people in the media are simply trying to present people with information that they might find useful. And that's pretty much how it works. So what media does for us, it does provide news and information. You know, I mean, even if you think you're getting your news and information off of social media, it's generally coming from some other media source, right? There's very little that happens on social media that is basically stolen from some other place. And for a while, you know, blogs were a big thing. Well, somebody actually researched this, and 98% of what was on blogs was simply copied from mainstream media. So advertising, people talk smack about advertising. Oh my gosh, my pop, who's in his 80s, goes on and on about how awful advertising is. Well, advertising provides information about goods and services, and you know, that's not without value. Advertising is largely what pays for media circulation. You know, subscriptions pays for some, but advertising is where the real dollars are. And the real challenge that we face in our time is that as online websites have replaced particularly local newspapers, there's just less information available. So Des Moines Burien used to have the Highline Times, Des Moines News, and if you lived here and you read that, you sort of found out what was going on in your community, in particular your government. Those are gone, replaced by my buddy Scott Schaefer and his Waterland blog and the B-Town blog, and it's okay, you know, but it's mostly just a bulletin board, and you know, whatever they manage to get is what shows up there. And sometimes it's just press releases because they don't make enough money from advertising online to be able to afford a full news staff. So that's a problem. So if you live in Federal Way and you still have the Federal Way Mirror, that's good, because they do okay, because they have actual reporters. The editor of that paper is a former student of mine, and she's really sharp and she does a good job. So that's a blessing. You know, in Des Moines, for example, we got almost nothing. We don't know what's going on. So media connects people with their government in two ways, one of which is because one of the things that media covers, albeit imperfectly, is politics. And so that's a way to find out, reading or listening or watching about what government is doing. On the other hand, they also interview ordinary people, which relays information back to people in government. So that's actually useful. Print media, online media tend to do a better job, particularly with politics. I mean, television is really good at covering events, things that are happening, things that are, you know, have pictures, right? And it's immediate, you know, which didn't used to be true of print media. Now that it's online, things get to you a lot quicker. But stuff that requires explanation, TV doesn't do a very good job. And most TV reporters, and now that there's even fewer of them, this is even worse. They don't get to specialize enough to understand enough about what they're reporting. So like when I worked in Olympia way back when there were, you know, real news bureaus and things down there, I was amazed at how little so many of these people knew about how government worked. I mean, I was just flabbergasted. I thought, you're doing this, you should know more about this. Media also provides perspective on events, and this can sometimes go sideways because, there are certain operations, in particular Fox News, they just have an agenda, right? And they pursue that agenda, and they make no bones about that. I think the best thing to do with media is to expose yourself to as many sources as possible. Okay. If you're only reading or listening or watching one thing, you're not getting sort of the whole picture. So if you kind of skip around a bit, you'll find things. I mean, there's nothing wrong with watching Fox News unless it's the only thing you watch. I will say, many people say, oh, CNN, MSNBC, they're so liberal. CNN looks liberal simply because they're still just trying to present the news. So, I mean, I don't watch them and go, oh my God, they're just a bunch of left-wingers. No, they're not. So a bit overtaken with self-promotion, but it's okay. It's okay. Now here, public opinion. This graphic was just so on the spot. I thought it's silly, but I'll use it. Public opinion matters. I'll tell you that. I'm going to ask you a question. Does public opinion matter? Well, you'll have to decide, but I'm giving you a big fat hint. Of course it matters. Who's not muted? Could you mute yourself, please? Don't need a lot of background noise here. Media reports, as we said. So, I mean, how do we find out about public opinion, right? Well, media reports is certainly one way. Direct communication, writing letters, sending emails, calling hotlines, showing up at public meetings, which are always interesting. One I was at, I was moderating a town hall for legislators from Federal Way, the 30th district, and one of them, Jesse Johnson, is a nice man. He works hard at a number of issues. Formerly on the Federal Way City Council. And so, the audience is lining up at the mic to ask questions after these folks have made their presentations. And this woman gets up and she says, Representative Johnson, are you also going to represent white people? And I just thought, holy carp, join the 20th century, if not the 21st. I'm just floored. It just floored me. I didn't say anything. I'm just a moderator, but I just thought, sweet, Jesu, what the hell are you saying? Because nothing he'd said had said, well, I'm only here for the black folks. I mean, it was just a sort of, if his skin had been white, you wouldn't have known the difference from the stuff that he talked about. But, that's kind of still the world that we live in, sadly. Social media is a way in which we can find out something about what people are thinking. And the thing about social media is that until recently, and still to some extent, you can post anything. I mean, I was just distantly involved in a thread in which somebody said, well, COVID's no worse than the cold. Well, the cold is not still killing 2,000 people a day, but people say that and other people glom onto that. And, sometimes we hear what we want to hear. So it's not filtered, which has, and I've talked to lots of people who agree, people say horrible things to each other on social media that they would never say in person. So at least you guys who are smart and rapidly becoming educated, remember there's another person on the other end there. So, and stuff online. I mean, I've learned this over years. If you send people emails, everything there sort of gets exaggerated. So you have to be really careful about how you email other people, especially if you're disagreeing with them. So, and I think the same thing is true with social media posts. Be diplomatic, right? Protest, clearly. Protests are a way in which people tell government what they think. This is public opinion, and it's notable. It's noteworthy. Sometimes it really makes a difference. I mean, the whole civil rights era was fueled by nonviolent protest, and that actually worked. I mean, it actually worked really well. India became independent from Great Britain because of nonviolent protest, and I think it's no accident that because India was essentially born in conditions of peace, they've had a republic ever since, right? And they've never had a coup. The military's never taken over. There's never been any questions. So protests, in essence, got us out of the Vietnam War. I mean, when else in the history of the world has popular opinion led a government to get out of a war? Almost never. Almost never. So that was really kind of a couple of remarkable events there. I mean, people who lived through it tend to remember the 1960s as crazy, but if you look back, you think you really should conclude, wow, things worked, you know? Citizens were able to make changes that were better, I think. Surveys, well done. Survey research is actually accurate. And the thing you should always look for when reading about a survey is what's the margin of error? And what that means is that they've run the statistical calculations to determine how likely this result is. And if you see that, you know that it's a real survey. If it's a self-selecting survey, which is to say, this is what legislators used to have us do when I worked there. We'd mail out these things to registered voters in the district, and then they would fill them out and send them back. Well, the people who send them back, it's not a random sample, which is one of the things that a good survey needs. Every member of the population has to have an equal chance of being chosen. Well, if it's self-selecting, the only people who send the surveys back are the people with really, really strong feelings, and they are a minority. I mean, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. They just are. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. So, but good survey research really kind of lets us know what's going on. So, and then finally, the only poll that matters, right? Voting. Clearly, people vote. And certainly, as I've watched presidential elections, the margin of victory for the president really says something about how they will get along with Congress. If it's a very narrow victory, Congress tends to say, this guy's not popular, we don't have to listen to him. If they win by a lot, then Congress sort of sits up and takes notice and says, well, this is kind of what people are saying that they want. So there's that. So those are the things on the next exam. I hope you will think about doing the reading and not just surfing the internet. I find that helps. Do you have any other questions? Anything else I can help you with? I'm all ears. I know that was pretty quick. All righty, I will just stay here. Otherwise, I got nothing else to tell you. So this is what we're going to do for the rest of the quarter. We'll have Zoom on Thursday, Tuesdays. I'm not in a place where I have access to Zoom, unfortunately, but I'm available otherwise. You know, if stuff doesn't make sense, please ask questions. And when you're answering the essay questions, you know, explain, do this, define, explain, cite relevant examples. I'll put that in the chat field. So you can copy that. Fine. So relevant examples are real ones, right? Not just sort of made up. So we were talking about federalism. We were talking about republics. I mean, think about that. Think about Canada. Think about the difference between Canada and the United States. And you can kind of see that not every government looks like ours. I think that that's a point we should take away. All right. Anything else? Okay. You're all great Americans. Stay safe out there, right? Keep wearing masks. What did I read? Wearing a mask lessens your chance of getting COVID by 65%. And it's, you know, it's worse than the cold. The flu never killed this many people. If you start hearing that kind of stuff, you know that, well, it's probably not true. Okay. You're all great Americans. I will see you next week. And otherwise, let me know how it's going, how I can help. You're going to do fine. If you just keep turning stuff in, you will do fine. You know, there's the extra credit already there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sky. You're welcome. Thank you, Natalie.
Oh, I have like an unrelated question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so when you're talking about voting, it kind of made me think, because with like the electoral college, okay, so if like a president gets like chosen, but they don't win by like popular vote. But then like electoral college can still like overrule that, right? And then choose the other one.
So we will talk about this when we talk about voting and elections, but we can talk about it now because this is a subject that confuses lots and lots of people, and that's all right. So what we have in this country is, in effect, 51 separate state level elections for president. So that includes the District of Columbia. And every state gets I'm going to mute you to get rid of the background noise there, Jayla. So if you pop yourself back on, if you need to say something. Every state gets electors equal to the size of their congressional delegation. So Washington State has 12 electoral votes because we have 10 representatives and 2 US senators. And in 49 of the states, it's just winner take all. So if a Democrat wins Washington State, they get those 12 electoral votes. And every state has, the electors are real people. Okay, so and the parties submit names, and the only rule is they can't be currently elected officials. So big donors, longtime party hacks, whatever, people there, they're trying to make things look better. It doesn't matter. Anyway, they pick 12 people. After the election in November and December, they go down to Olympia, they cast their ballots. And every state has a law that says you're going to cast your ballot the way the people voted. Some of them don't, and nobody's ever gone to jail for it or been fined. But by and large, it's never been enough to change an election. Those votes from the state capitals get transmitted to Congress, and the Senate ultimately certifies the election. So while it's possible that the electors could choose somebody else, it's never happened. And if the parties have a clue, they pick people who they can count on. Once in a while, somebody flips over, but it's never enough to make a difference. What it does sort of mean is that a president who loses the popular vote has some other political challenges. It's not a great system. It was created at a time, 1787, when, we were.
When there wasn't like enough population, like informed population, and so they had to like double check it.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Oh, okay, because I know a little bit about this, but it's been a while since I've actually looked into it. So they have the electoral college because back then they didn't have like enough informed people or something like that, so they had to like double check it.
Well, no, it was more that they were afraid that because we were 4 million people scattered up and down the eastern seaboard, and there was no mass, no rapid transit, no mass communications, information and people and goods traveled slowly, that everyone would simply vote for somebody they knew in their state. And so you wouldn't be able to elect a president. So the original idea was that people would elect a college of learned persons and they would decide. As soon as George Washington left office, that all changed, and parties began to, in essence, campaign for president in every state. And so very soon it was, I think South Carolina was the last one. By far, South Carolina was like nearly the Civil War before they let people choose who the electors were going to be. So you don't know who the electors are going to be when you vote. There's a name on the ballot, and that's who you vote for. So you need 270 votes to win because there are 538, and that's how campaigns are run. Serious presidential candidates look at the nominees, the Republican and Democrat nominees, and they look at which states are we going to win for sure, which ones can't we possibly win, and which ones do we need to win in order to carry this election. You should note the 2016 election when Mr. Trump was chosen. If you changed 75,000 votes in 3 states and Hillary Clinton is president, and people just had a dislike of her, which I will never completely understand, because I think she would have been a good president. I mean, she's a badass,
Same.
She was a tough lady. She was clearly pretty smart. She did not run a good campaign. when Bill Clinton ran, they had a sign, it was 1992, they had a sign in campaign headquarters and it said, "It's the economy, stupid." And he had a sense that really, people want decent livings and that's the issue you should focus on. And he actually, I guess, tried to get his wife's campaign to sort of acknowledge that. They were like, you don't know what you know, old man. And I think that hurt. She was talking about the wrong things, and Donald Trump managed to tap into people's fear and concern. It's a little frightening to me that somebody who says some of the things he said about women and immigrants and minorities, that you could still vote for that person. But oh well, I don't know what to say about that. But I'm just like, I hear that kind of stuff. It's like, I don't even care if I agree with your policies. You're a bad person. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. Anyway, thank you for that explanation, though.
Oh, good. I hope that helps. Other questions? Anything else, guys? Gang.
Have a nice day. Bye.
You too, Jayla. More or less. Riku, anything for you? Christina or Theo? Anything I can help you with?
Thank you. That's all.
Yeah. What's up? Oh, okay. All right, gang. I will see you next week. Be well, stay safe, take care, and hope to talk to you soon.